so I'm gonna try to do 15 minutes here. Um, get my point across, and believe it or not, I have already finished this drawing that I'm gonna be working on in this video, but I haven't been able to do the voice recording um, simply because I've been busy, and I'm actually busy today too. Um, I'm trying to make it 15 minutes and then move on from there. And of course, as you can see, my drawing is about, Aztec warrior type characters in media, but especially when it comes to fighting games. Now, I'm not sure if there's been any in other games, other than fighting games, but um, in fighting games, there is some. I was looking at it over it um, a little more, and I think I mentioned Kodo Khan from Mortal Kombat. You got that one Tekken guy. I forgot his name. Um, he seemed to be like a Mayan warrior, and of course you got T Hawk, and now the reason that we're talking about it is because of Lily, the new character for Street Fighter 6, um, who as from what we know so far, she is related to T Hawk, um, in some kind of way. And if you're familiar with the comic books, which I am, um, you've seen these other characters that are part of the tribe that seem to look very interesting, and I do believe that Lily was one of those characters. And yeah, I'm glad that she's on. But what I want to talk about today was the kind of like the history, kind of keep going with that a little bit, talking about the history of and so in the history, of fighting game characters when it comes to Mexicans, it's been a little weird from my perspective, at least from my perspective. I don't know the inside scoops for any of these things. I'm just talking as a fan of Street Fighter and as a fan of fighting games, in particular because of the art aspect. Now, uh, one of the ones that I found interesting was, let's start with um, let's start with King of Fighters, right? King of Fighters one, um, back in the 90s. I don't remember what year it was exactly, but they had Team Mexico, and Team Mexico was composed of three Shotos, believe it or not, and which is, for me, it's crazy because knowing what you know about Mexican characters now, Mexican fighting game characters now, most of them are wrestlers, right? Unfortunately, I say this. Now, I don't have anything against wrestlers or Mexican wrestling. It's worldwide famous for a reason. Um, but they're very athletic and they're very creative when it comes to their movements, and in that sense. But it's kind of repetitive to always see those types of characters in fighting games, and the worst part about it is that, in my opinion, anyways, they always seem to be gag characters, and they always seem to be characters that aren't very taken very seriously. Now, I'm not saying that gag characters are bad or that they're um, unnecessary in a fighting game. I'm not saying that. There's very good gag characters or comedic relief characters that are, actually pretty good. Kind of like, for example, Sean, Street Fighter, Third Strike. Um, Characters like that are kind of funny, but they're still, kind of serious in a way. Dan is another one who I think is one of the best ones out there, one of the best gag characters out there. Um, But when it comes to Mexican characters, Mexican fighting game characters, for the most part, it seems like they try to break the mold. It seems like, from my perspective, it seems like they try to break the mold of the same old gag wrestling characters, but for some reason it's not received well by the public in some way, and they kind of backtrack. Um, and one of the first examples that I can tell you about is King of Fighters, where Team Mexico was five Shoto characters. One of them was the most famous one is Ryu. Or I don't know if it's pronounced that way or it's pronounced different, but it's the SNK Ryu, which looks more like Kin. It was another Japanese character who's also a Shoto, and I forgot his name. But then there was a third one who was the one that looked the most Mexican to me was an Antonio Banderas looking character. Who's called Roberto, I think, but Roberto Martinez, I believe, or Garcia. Uh, it's very Spanish name, and I'm sorry about getting confused with the names, but if you know anything about SNK and Kino Fighters and stuff like that, this is a very popular character, and he even came back in SNK 15, the new one, or is it 16? I don't know. But the thing about it is that these were all Shoto characters and very not stereotypical Mexican characters, except for kind of Roberto. He was kind of Mexican looking. Well, it turns out that I don't know what happened. Maybe it wasn't received well or whatever. Backtracked or something, and they were no longer Team Mexico. Team Mexico was replaced by three, you guessed it, wrestling characters, and very funny type wrestling characters. I'm not gonna say gag characters, but in my opinion, they are kind of gaggy, kind of comedic type characters. One of them is a guy with an eye patch whose name is Ramon, wrestling character. And the other guy is, it's a wrestling girl, and a guy dressed as a T-Rex, which is his wrestling costume for some reason. But this is what they went for, what they backtracked to, and that was the first example. Of course, there could be other reasons due to the story, but at the same time, has Japanese fighting games backtracked from things? Yes, especially Capcom. Now I know we're talking about SNK, but that was just an example. If you go to Capcom, you could see when they backtrack. The only time they didn't was T-Hawk, and T-Hawk was still kind of like a wrestler in a way, but he was more like a warrior type. His move set is kind of grapply. He's kind of like a grappler in a way, but he wasn't a gag character, right? And he wasn't a wrestler, so that was a good thing in my opinion when it comes to T-Hawk. And I think you could tell the respect that went into the character, the way they designed him, the way he looks, the serious face that he has, even his stance. Kind of they wanted you to, I guess, respect this character in a way, or see him like as a manly type character. And everything that went into his design, it was very well done in my opinion when it comes to T-Hawk. So yeah, but of course they didn't backtrack with that one. The Street Fighter 2. He was in Street Fighter 2. I believe Turbo. I don't remember exactly. But that was probably the best one in my opinion. And then you got Keen, who is also a wrestler from Tekken. He's also a Mexican character, but like I said, another wrestler. The good thing about Keen is that he's not so much a gag character, although sometimes he does do some goofy stuff. But he's not so much a guy character, you know. In the beginning, it was very serious, his mission and stuff like that. But the good thing was that he was taken at least somewhat serious, in my opinion. Um, but this is pretty much the history of it. Even if you look at some of the newer editions, Street Fighter Third Strike, um, there was a character called Urian, and he was supposed to be Mexican at first. And if you look at his stage, he was supposed to be an ancient type of warrior type thing, right? His background had these um, these Aztec or Mayan looking statues in the back, which made it seem like he was going to be some type of, you know, they were finally going to do this the Aztec thing that I've been saying, or this Mayan or Mesoamerican type ancient warrior type thing, which is, like I said, is something that hasn't been tapped into, in my opinion, or at least not to the extent that it could be. Um, at least not the way they do wrestling. I mean, every Mexican warrior is a Mexican character seems to be a wrestler nowadays. Um, One of the worst examples that I could think of is El Fuerte, right? And my question is, why do they seem to backtrack when it comes to these characters? Like, for example, going back to Urian, Urian was a Mexican character. Urian, in the beginning, you know, was from Mexico. And when I first saw him, you know, believe it or not, even though he was a little bit too tall, a little bit too muscular, he did seem, even though the weird part of the beginning where he turns from a white person to a to a Mexican type person, it was kind of weird. But I did think that he was one of these divers from Mexico. I don't know if anybody knows, but in Acapulco there's a famous cliff where divers dive off from, and most of them are wearing speedos, and they dive off from very big distances, and it's famous for that, and it's also famous for, you know, fishermen, like fishermen that fish with their hands. Um, and a lot of them, you know, are very muscular. They're very athletic looking. They have swimmers' bodies, similar to what Urian had. A little bit exaggerated, of course, because it's a cartoon or an anime. But but it was, you know, similar to what I've seen in southern Mexico. Um, but like, yet again, they backtracked, and then later on, he wasn't from Mexico anymore. He was from a unknown location or something like that. Um, so my question is why? I guess I'm getting into the to you guys to answer it. Um, is it because of the people they don't like Mexican characters being too serious or being too? Do they prefer gay characters? Which I don't think is the case, because El Fuerte is one of the most hated characters, including from myself. I do not like El Fuerte. I think it was lazy and kind of insulting in a way. But um, yeah, and the same thing goes for Nakali, right? For Nakali, when Nakali came out, he was supposed to be the main antagonist, I believe, and it was supposed to be talking about the origin stories of the Dark Hado, or the Satsui no Hado. But yet again, they backtracked again, right? And somebody else took the place of the main antagonist. So this is the type of stuff that I feel like needs to be at least looked at from the fans, at least, or something, or maybe these new devs that are working on the Street Fighter 6, who I do think they're doing a good job. Maybe they should look into it. But it does seem like they try to put up, you know, good Mexican characters, but then in the end they tend to like backtrack from it. But anyways, that's pretty much it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this